Speaking about AI, I think most artists feel threatened because, on one hand, it might be a misunderstanding of what the tools are. And in another hand, there's some valid reasons to be against the way that these models were trained and so on and so forth. But the way I'm using these tools, something like Midjourney, is a custom, unlimited, highly customizable stock generator that I can generate things in the style that I want. But I think people have this false dichotomy outlook into what AI art is.
GM, and welcome back to the NFT Now podcast. I'm Matt Medved, and today's guest is digital artist Chema Mendez, who has been gaining a lot of steam in the space, attracting the support of notable artists and collectors like Jack Butcher, and is our next featured artist on LG Art Lab. On November 21st, he'll be releasing Leave the Darkness Behind, an editioned work, and we're very excited to learn more about the work and also his path to success in a digital art market that has been quite difficult to navigate for many amid the bear market. So very excited for this. Before we jump in, just want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by LG Art Lab, a digital art gallery that you can enjoy at home. LG Art Lab transforms your living room into a world-class gallery, enhancing accessibility, allowing art lovers to enjoy their digital collection on LG OLED TVs. And now integrated with the Ethereum blockchain, LG Art Lab lets you collect, trade, and display digital artworks in the United States seamlessly on lgartlab.com. All right. Well, very excited to dive in here. One last thing. If you haven't already, want to encourage you to sign up for our newsletter at nftnow.com/newsletter. Each week, we are distilling everything happening in the space into actionable insights straight to your inbox, free of charge. So without any further ado, Chema Mendez. Chema Mendez on the NFT Now podcast. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, man.
Always a pleasure, man. Where are we catching you right now?
I live in Tenerife in the Canary Islands.
Amazing. I've heard it's super beautiful out there.
Yeah, they call it the Hawaii of the Atlantic.
Amazing. Well, I like the Hawaii of anything personally, but I know we got a lot to talk about. So let's jump in a bit. I know obviously, you have a long career at the intersection of art and technology. Well before entering the Web3 space. I'd love to just hear a little bit about your backstory. Like, how did you get into, I know it started with computer graphics and then it got into digital art and then your transition to Web3. So take us through it.
Sure. Ever since I was a kid, I used to draw a lot. I was naturally gravitating to drawing and painting. My parents were super supportive of me and put me on all these art classes and so on. When I was a teenager, I was born in the late 80s. So by the time I was a teenager, the internet started to be a thing. Personal computers were starting to be more of a common thing. And I was really into it. So that intersection of getting into the computer science and having this artistic aptitude is what sort of led into me starting to learn about Photoshop. And back then there was no social media, so the way you would socialize with people online were through IRC chats and forums and stuff like that. So that's how I learned how to create graphics. I used to simply now you have digital identities through PFPs. Back then it was the same thing, the avatar, the signature in the forums. That was the big thing. So I would do those for the communities that I was in. And that's how I got introduced to graphic design. Fast forward that into my college years, where I went to FIT in Manhattan for communication design. And so I got, a speed run of all sorts of art stuff. So life drawing and sculpture and all sorts of Illustrator, Photoshop, the whole gamut of computer graphics and art in general. And coming out of college, I started doing a lot of freelancing, focused my time on just corporate gigs, branding, advertising, that kind of stuff. Soon I discovered that was pretty boring and that I wasn't really doing anything artistic with my skills. And that's when in 2009 I started a digital collage series and built up a portfolio for about a year. And then I posted that portfolio on Reddit in a subreddit called We Are the Music Makers, because I thought maybe my stuff, because I had received some comments saying that, oh, that looks like a really cool album cover. So that sparked the idea of sharing my work on a music community. And from that post, the post blew up completely. It was like number 2 post of all time in that subreddit. And I got dozens and dozens of commissions from there. So like pretty much like 3 or 4 years of work from that one post. And yeah, that was a pivotal moment in my digital art career. Like that was the first time that I said, okay, maybe I don't need to do logos for a living. Maybe I can actually do art for a living and live off of it. That led me to get in touch with some record labels, because I figured, you know, going musician by musician or producer by producer might be a harder task than if I just link up with a record label who has a steady stream of releases. And that's when I linked up with Dirty Bird Records from California. I worked for them for like 7 or 8 years until they got recently acquired by Empire. And yeah, and then that gig led me to getting a lot of other record labels, because there was pretty on the top of electronic music and underground tech house stuff. So yeah, and then I'll just summarize into Web3, but one of the label owners was also into crypto, and he just out of the blue in late 2020 sent me a text message saying, "Hey man, I know you like crypto," because I was running a mining rig back then for ETH. And he was like, "You should check out Rarible." And in October 2020, I logged into Rarible for the first time and blew my mind. Like I was like, wow, this is insane. Like people are actually like making art and being collected in exchange for Ethereum. The concept and the royalty as well. Now royalties don't mean crap, but back then it was a big thing for me. And yeah, so that was pretty much the start of this new chapter in my career.
I love that, man. And I actually didn't know about the Dirty Bird element and the dance music stuff. You know, that's a big part of my background as well. I founded Billboard Dance, and you know, I've known Claude Van Stroke, you know, Barkley for a minute now, and
Yeah.
you know, I remember that we did a lot of support to the Dirty Bird crew during the Billboard years, and you know, a lot of those other artists as well. So really cool to hear, you know, that's part of your background as well. I feel like there's so many incredible artists got their start making, you know, like with client work in the music space, and are now, it's amazing to see like kind of blossoming in their own right. So that's really cool.
Yes, it's cool to work with record labels and creative people in general, because they often know how to treat creatives. You know, like they allow you to stay in your lane and do whatever you have to do. They usually don't have too much direction, and they fully like deposit their trust on you as a creative person. I was able to get done it was 2021. I did all the cover artwork for the label. They usually rotate artists each year, and after 5 years, because I emailed Barkley in like
Yeah.
2018 or something, and he loved my stuff, and we started working right away with the aim of getting to the covers. And it took me like 5 years of like a lot of like posters and event flyers and merch design and stuff, until I finally in 2021 got to do the covers, which are minted by the way, and we sold them as NFTs.
I love that, man. I love that. You know, it's funny. Like when we first was like starting NFT Now, I remember the first time that I met Victor Mosquera. I was like, wait, we've met before, and we were like, where have we met? Turns out, you know, we met at Coachella with Odessa, because he was doing Odessa
Right.
visuals, and I've known the Odessa guys for a
Awesome.
long time. And so it was like, I just love, you know, I know that Fuck Render did a lot of work with musicians as well. I know Nest Graphics did stuff with like Martin Garrix, Travis Scott, et cetera. And so it's really cool to see just like, you know, digital artists, like, you know, moving from that client work model to like being able to build collector bases in their own right.
It's a dream come true. I've always was envious of traditional artists that were in this circuit of trad art with galleries, collectors, and being able to work on series for themselves without any like commercial output at all. So like I slowly transitioned into this. It took, like a good amount of years. By the end of 2022, I was able to like fire most of my clients that were like just not, who were not like vibing correctly. And I stayed with two basically Kidball records and Dirty Bird records. And yeah, and now it's like 90% my stuff and 10% client work, which is a dream come true.
That's amazing, and that's actually really impressive given the state of the market. Like that's something I'd love to hear a bit about too. Obviously, you came up at that time when 2021, 2022, the NFT space was hot, the digital art market was moving, all that. Obviously, it's been a more challenging. The bear market's been long and challenging, but I know that you continue to move work and you continue to sell in what is quite a tough market for digital artists right now. I'd love to hear a bit about like what do you attribute that to, and like any strategies or kind of sort of approaches that you made once things moved from bull to bear.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's not something that I set out to do. Like I didn't at the beginning of the year. I wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna make it this year. Like if I think if you speak with people who like quote unquote made it, they never really set out to do that. They just focus on their work, and that just sort of happened to them. But I did change my strategy at the beginning of the year. Up until now, I was focused on a lot of on editions and not one of ones. And my strategy was spend a couple of weeks to a month working on one piece and maintain it as an edition. And that's sort of how I got through. Like there's more liquidity in editions, they're easier to sell and so forth. And this year, I said, I'm gonna try something different. Instead of making less art and putting a lot more time into it, I'm gonna make a lot more art and putting less time into each piece. So at the beginning of the year, I started making one piece per day, sort of like the Beeple model. Beeple, he's been doing 17 years of everyday art. And I said, okay, let's see how I can take that model and apply it to my style, which is digital collage. So I began doing that. It started as a 28-day challenge just because I was in a bit of a creative funk. And I said, okay, a good challenge. I gathered around a few of my friends in the space, and we set out to do 28 days of daily art. By the middle of the challenge, the meme card team, 6529, they approached me to do a meme card. And that was a little glimpse of like, okay, this consistency of output, it's really paying off. Like you're sort of like showing everyone else that you're here every day and you're putting out creative work every single day. And I've read about people who do the daily practice that I read it in a few stances that you cannot predict the opportunities that are going to like arise from doing the daily practice. So after the 28 days challenge was over, I decided to keep going. Today, the day we're recording this, marks the 300th day of consecutive daily art, which is incredible. And that's basically what I attribute this sort of like success that I've been receiving over the past few months. It didn't go like up right away. It was like a very gradual, steady line, very slow at the beginning, and then after a few drops, a few big collectors like Jack Butcher, OSF, acquired a few of my works at the same time, and that sort of like sent this signal out to other collectors, and then it's sort of like a snowball effect where like I started receiving more requests in the DMs for private sales, and that that signal getting amplified, and now and this year I haven't dropped a single edition yet. It's been all one of ones, which is like the opposite of what I've been doing. And sometimes you have to like sit back and say, okay, what if I do the complete opposite of what I've been doing? What would be the consequences? And luckily, like it was the right move, and
Love that, and congrats on the that milestone. That's really significant.
thank you.
Yeah, I've so many artists I've spoken to who have gone down that path, have really spoken to just how transformative that can be, and like really the discipline that builds, and the way it hones your skills. And I know you said that it wasn't like it wasn't like one big thing or like that. Like it was a very like gradual, slow burn up. Were there any moments that kind of stood out as like kind of breakthroughs, or like moments where you're like, okay, like I feel like the winds are at my sails, or this was kind of a game changer?
Yeah, it's definitely a numbers game. And the more art you do, the more chances you have of like creating this one piece that sort of like hits a nerve and goes viral. And that happened to me, I believe it was the end of May, where I put out this piece called Balance, and it got like 1.2 million views on Twitter. And I have this theory that once you have this consistency of content and a few of the posts get this much engagement, the algorithm sort of like puts you in this category where like it really like allows you to like have a broader audience. And since then, like my artwork has been like pushed to like many people like every single day, with some exceptions, which is humbling and also satisfying in a way. Like 2 days ago, I put out a piece and got like less than 1/10 of what I usually get in terms of engagement. And what that told me was that it's not that I have this like magic algorithm hack that anything that I put out gets thousands of likes. Rather, like I've gotten into this creative flow where like I'm really tapping into something special and putting out work that is resonating with people, which is cool. And, like there's nothing special about my name or my account or the algorithm. It's just like the artworks that I'm creating are tapping into this more collective consciousness or more like mass appeal, if you want to call it that way.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And how would you kind of describe your own work? Like, how would you sort of like describe your aesthetic, your approach, and also sort of like your creative process?
It's evolved over the years, and especially this year. Making one piece per day really forces you to think about the creative process in different ways and experimenting. It's really cool because when you have to make one piece every day, you allow yourself to be more loose and experiment more, as opposed to if you're making one piece per month and you have to sell it, and if it goes wrong, like it adds so much tension. So like the flexibility and experimentation feeling of it really allows to like explore different things. So my style has evolved from being maybe like this very complex and abstract digital collage with tons of detail to more conceptual, sort of like visual puns in a way, but instead of like being funny, they're tapping to like core beliefs, core emotions, famous sayings, things that really like I feel like they're timeless. Sometimes I call them like timeless memes. Something that ideas that if you see some of my pieces in 200, 300 years, they will still be relevant because they're part of the human condition and they're not necessarily part of like the modern day culture. I also do social commentary and stuff like that. Some of my works are like criticizing like media in general, like legacy media, for example, or like consumer uh, culture, or like late stage capitalism, or like screen time. Just things that I observe, and since I have to do something today, like I might as well just like play around with this idea I have in my head and try to make an artwork out of it. Also, the process has changed quite a lot with the introduction of AI tools in my workflow. I started making art like 2009, so like 15 years ago, and my style was basically sourcing material from Renaissance paintings, 1800s books of biology, diversity, and Baroque, and all these like art movements that are all in the public domain. And I always felt like my work was being limited not only by that aesthetic, but also the source material that was available. So the human form that I was able to use was limited to like the paintings that had human form in it. Now with AI tools, I can pose a human in any angle, any position, any dynamic pose that I want. So this has allowed me to really create more narrative work other than purely aesthetic and abstract work that looks great, but maybe it's lacking some underlying concept or meaning.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, let's jump in because obviously, like, we're super excited to have you be one of the featured artists that we've curated for LG Art Lab. For those who may not be aware, we have a global partnership with LG. LG Art Lab is kind of their digital art, almost like a startup within like the kind of the bigger corporate entity of LG, and really focused on democratizing access to digital art and bringing digital art to millions of screens right now in the U.S. and soon to be across the world. And we're super excited to have you. So I'd love to just hear a bit about the piece that you selected for that release and the details there.
For sure. So the piece is called "Leave the Darkness Behind," and like I was mentioning, some core human emotions and experiences. The piece was one of my dailies, and I animated it for this drop, which is really cool, and also reformatted it so it fits neatly in the TV format. And the piece is about, I bet 99.9 of us have had some dark times in our lives, and the piece tries to capture this tipping point in which you make the right moves, the right decisions to leave those times behind. And it features a human form in a hole that is breaking through the sky, with the human form looking out into the clear sky with this hole of darkness in the back of the human form.
Very cool, very cool. And I know that you're this is a piece that I think has your fan base and the like are familiar with before, you've shared before, but this is the first time that it's been minted.
Yes, correct. Out of the 300 pieces that I've done so far this year, only around 10% are minted, and this is going to be the second one out of the 300 that is animated, and the first one that's going to be an animated edition ever from me in my entire NFT space career.
Love that, love that. And I know that this one, in keeping with kind of your approach, this one is going to be an edition, correct?
Yes, correct. I wanted to save an edition drop to something special, and this was the perfect opportunity for it.
Awesome. Well, we're super excited, and just also curious. Obviously, LG Art Lab's a new platform. We've had some great drops with Amadon and Emi Kusano and some great artists coming up. What drew you to the opportunity?
Well, the chance of having my art displayed on so many screens, I think is priceless. Just that, like just knowing that people that are not even like in the space, because as of now, my work was being limited to like the Web3 space in a way, due to the nature of where we post things and the bubble that we live in NFT space. Thankfully, this year was a breakthrough for me, both on Instagram and Twitter, and because my art resonates with this, I feel like this deep, like core human emotion or set of emotions. It has begun to spread out of the NFT bubble, but it's still on a platform that is either X or Twitter. So in order to break away from these platforms, an opportunity like being on a physical display that's not a computer, that is not someone actively looking for digital art, that is just presented to them, I thought it would be very special.
Yeah, no, I love it, and we're excited to have you, and excited for the release. I think that's another really exciting thing there is just being able to put meaningful digital art in front of like, just so many more eyeballs. Because I think that that's like one of these areas where, bringing people in and helping people understand this space, I think is like so critical to like the mainstream adoption that we hope to usher in. And so happy to have you as a part of that wave.
Definitely, it's a great opportunity to, because I think, I'm biased because I'm an artist and I'm constantly looking at art, but I feel like the most people like out and about in general, maybe they're not really thinking about art all the time. So like maybe like a little force feeding of art into their daily lives is a good way to like maybe spark something in their imagination, or maybe they say, or they look at my artwork on their TV and they see the name and they look me up on Instagram or Twitter, and they get a soft introduction into the digital art scene, which is great.
That's awesome, man. I think it was actually, I had seen your work on the timeline before and the like, but I know Jack Butcher kind of gave you like a ringing endorsement. I know we were chatting with him, and he was like, "Oh, like Chema Mendez, you got to know like his work." I was just curious, like what's the was kind of the relationship between you guys, and obviously he's a great guy to have in your corner.
It's weird. Like I never set out for that to happen, but I think he recognized something in my work, and he was very supportive, just out of the blue, collecting my work and DMing me, saying that he really likes my work and to keep it going. And yeah, just completely blessed to have someone like him of his caliber, just you know. Just giving a good word for me. I'm super grateful. Like, yeah, I'm a bit of like at a loss for words in that regard, because like the typical approach for an artist to get recognized is to like spam the comment section or like the DMs, and I would love to like put out this thing, or like that's really not the approach of how you get recognized. You get recognized by just putting in the work and just being as consistent and prolific as possible. Like, I really am a believer of like the artwork has to speak for you, and the rest will sort of like sort itself out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, well, I know that there's like it's such a like it's an interesting time right now. Like obviously having like kind of navigated the cycle, like what kind of trends are you seeing in the digital art space right now? Like and like kind of the crypto space at large, and how is that kind of informing how you think about 2025 from Shema Mendez?
Great question. We haven't had a good like art meta in a while. The last one that did pretty well was the open edition stuff. But we haven't had something like that in a while. Maybe the new meta is quasi free mints, or like like 10-cent mints. Um, I'm not. I don't see how I can tap into that as of now. I don't see the utility, but I do see how that works for a lot of people, and I see that people what they're doing with rodeo. I can see how that makes a lot more sense for not only the platform in terms of like revenue, but also just creating a product that is of an easier entry for someone who's not maybe tech savvy or doesn't really need like MetaMask wallet, seed phrases. Because being honest, that's a bit of a tough barrier of entry for the regular person. Um, in terms of trends that I see right now, I can't say that there are any obvious answers for that. And one of my biggest lessons of this year is just to focus on my own thing and keep doing the dailies, and just be receptive for opportunities like these to come about, just purely from the work that I put out. Like it's easy to see something working and copying it, but I think it's more valuable to like create your own thing, and that works for you, and just stick into that. So right now I have a big one-of-one collection that is it's going to be 100 pieces, and only 36 have been minted so far. So I have plenty one-of-ones to drop in that collection. The holders for that collection receive monthly airdrops, and we're creating a great community around that collection. So my focus for the remainder of this year and next year is going to be that collection and some unique special drops like the one we're doing with LG and you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, very exciting, very exciting. And it's interesting. I know you mentioned the rodeo thing. That obviously, kind of there was a lot of talk on the timeline after Foundation, kind of they rebranded their Instagram from Foundation to Rodeo, and like there was some confusion there. I know you've minted on Foundation previously, so I was just curious, like, what was your take on that as an artist, in the space, and just if that's indicative of kind of that larger trend.
Yeah, it was very interesting move. I think the timeline overreacted 100% to what was done. People saw the rebranding of an Instagram account as them saying that they're going to like sunset Foundation, which is not the case at all. But our friend Jack did something very, very unique when that happened, which is he minted a negative on Rodeo and the same picture as a positive on Foundation. And as an experiment to see like which one would work best as a mint. They both did similarly in terms of sales, but Foundation keeps 5% while Rodeo keeps half or 25%. I can't remember. So even though the sales were the same, the Rodeo platform kept more money for them. And that's why I mentioned that it makes sense in terms of revenue. Because if you have a huge amount of volume, even though it's like very small sales, but the volume is high and you keep a larger percent of the sale, it makes business sense for them to have this product that, it doesn't really compete with Foundation. They're completely separate things. But it makes sense for them to have a feed in both worlds.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very like measured and I think take. I think that's very very fair. Um, Curious too, like you know, I know that you come from the digital space and kind of digital native. Like, how are you thinking about the role of the traditional art world in like your career? Obviously, like there's it's kind of this interesting debate where like in 2021 2022 a lot of people came up and were like, we don't need galleries anymore, we don't need auction houses, like it was like direct to the people, all that, which there's an idealistic element there too. But I think one thing we've seen is kind of like the rise, like since the kind of shift in the market, it seems like galleries have become quite important, especially even like these kind of more like digital native platforms that are almost doing the work as galleries. And obviously, mm-hmm. like the auction houses can then also, even though they take a higher percentage, they can add to prestige cachet. So I'm just curious, like as a digitally native artist, like how do you think about some of the traditional art institutions? And I know that like your work has obviously in some ways been, has explored some of the like more commercial elements of this in sometimes a critical lens. So I'm just curious, like where your head's at.
Yeah, that's a great question. I see this, this digital art scene through blockchain just as a launch pad for artists to get into the trad art and the galleries circuit and museum circuit. As well as the natural tendency that we're seeing in our society of things becoming digital. We've seen it in many industries. I mean, it revolutionized the music industry for better or for worse, but it was bound to happen to the art industry. So in my perspective, how I see myself or my career going in the next 5 to 10 years is building up a name through the digital art scene and what we know as Web3, and getting to a point where like I can get into museums, galleries, do solo shows, and so forth. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they can definitely coexist, and I expect that a new set of new names is going to take over in the next few years in terms of the old guard being like purely physical and the new the new people are going to be in the digital realm.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on there.
If I may add another point, I was just this weekend. I went to the local museum here in Tenerife. We have a amazing space with really cool installations, and I was just walking through the installations, and I just thought, man, there's something to be said about experiencing art in a setting like this. You know,
Yeah.
there's being confined to a timeline to really take in a piece of art. It's tough, like there's a reason why gallery walls are completely blank and the artwork is in the middle. It's so that you can just immerse yourself in a piece. And when you have, like you're scrolling through Twitter or Instagram, it really doesn't make a piece of art service to be experienced that way. So I think with enough time, we'll be able to, like the big names. I mean, you already see like you mentioned, like Sam Spratt and the likes. Like the exhibition that he did in Vienna or Venice, sorry, that was something else. Like I only saw pictures, but like being able to like take in his work in that setting is, I think, a glimpse of the future.
Yeah, I think that's like that's one of the reasons why Gateway has been so important for us at Now Media. Just being able to get digital art also in front of the traditional art world and have people experience it in a way that like actually does justice to it, right? And I think that's really special. It's a lot for a lot of people. I always say it's like we're skating to where the puck is going, but we still got to meet the market where it's at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where the market's at, like people still, like resonate with exhibitions, with physical elements, with being able to to experience this and like museum grade quality in a way that transcends the screen, right? And so I think that's like a lot of the artists that we mentioned, a lot of the artists that are still continuing to like really push this forward have been very intentional about that when it comes to like how their art is experienced in the physical world.
Definitely, like you don't invite someone on a date to like check out the Twitter timeline for artwork. Like you're taking time out of your day and going to a place and really putting yourself in this mindset of like experiencing an exhibition. And I think more and more artists will come out of Web3 that will take on this way of experiencing art, and hopefully I'm one of them.
Boom. What's like inspiring you as an artist right now? Like what obviously we're in a we're in like it's like such a crazy time, I think, to be an artist. The rise of AI, like these like generative tools can be really empowering. I know that in some ways they also kind of can feel threatening to some artists too. I'm curious, like where are you drawing inspiration? Like how are you kind of like leveraging like the new technology and the like, and where do you kind of see that role within your own artistry?
Yeah. Speaking about AI, I think most artists feel threatened because, on one hand, it might be a misunderstanding of what the tools are. And in another hand, there's some valid reasons to be against the way that these models were trained and so on and so forth. But the way I'm using these tools is like, imagine, you probably are familiar with stock image banks, so stuff like Envato or like Adobe Stock or Shutterstock. For me, having something like Midjourney is a custom, unlimited, highly customizable stock generator that I can generate things in the style that I want. I avoid making references to contemporary artists or like any artist at all. Since I've been creating digital collage, sourcing from Renaissance oil paintings, all the stuff that I generate to make my artworks have this oil painting look. So it's none of my work is an AI output at all. Like I generate specific parts and then I retexturize them. I put them in my compositions, and they tend to be like, out of all my work, maybe like 10% or 15% of the entire canvas. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less is AI. But I think people have this false dichotomy outlook into what AI art is. People say, "Oh, AI art is you put in some text, you get an image, you put it online, and you say that you created it." It's a super like myopic view of what the actual power of these tools are.
Completely agree. I think one thing we often said is like AI to us is not just about like artificial intelligence; it's about like augmented imagination, right? Like the power of
Yes,
this
yes,
of these tools in the hands of creatives and creators. It can streamline things. It can make things more efficient. It can absolutely transform a workflow. For example, I come from
yes,
the music world as a music producer. I've been using Suno, and very similar to what you said. Like I don't like I don't just like export a song and be like, that's it, it's ready for the streaming services. What you said about stock images very much reminds me of sample packs. Like I've always said, like with Suno, I can essentially create my own sample packs. And for those who don't know,
yes.
music producers rely, especially dance electronic, use a ton of sample packs that are like very streamlined and the like, and they and use them very, very frequently within productions. And now you can literally create your own custom ones from scratch. That doesn't mean that you're not still creating songs yourself and mapping things out and coming up with creative ideas, but it just gives you more power to shape things and bring ideas to life quicker and more true to your vision, especially if your skill set isn't traditional when it comes to those platforms.
100% agree. I also dabbled in music production in my 20s for many, many years. And, Splice is used by
Yeah,
every music producer and it's having
totally.
like, yeah, yeah. And so what you said is a very good point that it, it really aids in your creativity. It allows you to like express your vision in a more efficient way. When, like instead of like I'm not saying that it's the only way to make art. In fact, I totally agree and understand that an oil painter that produces a large oil painting has a lot more merit than me creating a digital collage in 3 hours using some AI elements. 100% agree. But the the effort is not the only thing that adds value to a piece of work. It's the concept that spark of imagination that went into creating the piece of work, how people feel when they see it. That in many ways I could argue is has a lot more value, more emotional value to a piece of work.
Totally agree. I think it's like, in addition to, Claire Silver likes to say taste is the new skill, but I also think that
Yes.
like narrative and vision are going to be more important than ever, in terms of differentiating projects that use that, it's and that element. And no, I'm, big techno optimist over here.
Yes.
I'm in favor of these platforms. It's going to be very interesting evolution as things move forward. Um, I'd love to just also hear, what's next for Chema Mendez? Like, what do you have? I know you hinted at some projects you have coming up. Like, what's you got coming? Obviously, this LG Art Lab drop, but then beyond that, looking ahead to 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, one of the things about blockchain based art and this huge like intersection of different technologies is being able to add layers of complexity to a piece of work. Like right now, I just put out a collaboration with Young Weekend and OG that is generative and dynamic work. So the piece has traits as a generative project, but also has a dynamic element to it that the piece changes shading and color every 24 hours, or sorry, every hour on the 24 hours to reflect the time of the day outside. So I think that's a taste of like new ways of thinking about creating art. It doesn't have to be just an image. This image can sort of be alive through code and through different ways of iterations by minting larger amounts of pieces of the same work. So I think moving forward, I'm definitely going to explore that aspect of art, like how to create something that is more than just one image.
Very interesting. Well, we're excited to see it, man. We're excited to see it. Anything else you wanted to speak to before we wrap things up?
No, not really. Just really enjoyed this conversation. I could do this for many, many hours. So
Same, man. Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to meet you hopefully next year in New York for an NFT NYC. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Well, we are very excited to have you be part of the LG Art Lab family and very excited for your release. And we will see you again. And till next time on the NFT Now podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, man. It's been a great
Thank
convo.
you. Really appreciate everything that you've done. Thank you.
Love that conversation. I thought that he made some really great points in terms of his strategy with Editioned Works and also his thoughts on AI tools and how they play into his creative workflow and the future of the space. As mentioned, Chema Mendez will be releasing Leave the Darkness Behind on November 21st via LG Art Lab. We are proud to be partnering with them, curating the digital art drops and helping bring them to the masses, millions of digital screens across the United States. So very exciting for us. Hope you'll check it out. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please do leave us, some stars, some feedback on your podcast provider of choice. It helps resurface this to others and help spread the word on everything we're doing and the future when it comes to digital art and digital assets here. Without any further ado, I will catch you next week on the NFT Now podcast.